An ordinary night in Dice. The night of September 16th, 2022. Dice, Aberdeen. A typical, quiet suburb where residents were accustomed to deserted streets after midnight. Yet, in the early hours of the following morning, that silence was shattered by a scream. A man walking his dog heard it. Then, another woman heard it too. A female voice. Just a single word. No. No one knew that, not far away, a woman was fighting for her life. Her name was Jill Barclay, 47 years old, a mother, a partner, an engineer, a woman who loved music and staying active, and who still had the enthusiasm to go see her idol perform live. Just hours earlier, Jill had been enjoying a perfectly ordinary evening. She had traveled to Aberdeen with a friend to see Adam Ant perform at the Aberdeen Music Hall. It was supposed to be a fun night out. Laughter. Friends. After the show, Jill and her friend headed to the Spider's Web, a pub in Dice. Little did she know that, in that very place, a stranger was about to enter her life. His name was Rhys Bennett. 22 years old, Bennett was not from Aberdeen. He was working temporarily in the area for a fencing company that primarily served farms. That night, he was drinking with a colleague. Two people, two lives. There was no connection between them. No bad blood, no dispute, no history, no apparent reason for them to become central figures in the same murder case. But after Jill left the pub to walk home, Bennett followed her, and from that moment on, security cameras began to tell the story. It was a story that investigators would later use to piece together the final minutes of Jill's life. On camera, Bennett appeared ahead of Jill. But instead of continuing on, he slowed down. Then he turned back. He checked her position. Jill was trailing behind. The gap between them wasn't just a few steps. It was a span of about 25 seconds. This seemed like a minor detail, but it became one of the most crucial pieces of evidence in the case, because Jill wasn't walking with Bennett by choice. She appeared to be trying to keep her distance. She slowed down. At times, she stopped completely. Then, she moved on again. Prosecutors later argued that this behavior showed Jill had noticed the man ahead and felt unsafe. She didn't know what he wanted, but she knew she didn't want him too close. And the terrifying part was, she had done everything someone in that situation could think to do. She let him walk ahead. She slowed down. She created distance. Yet, Bennett didn't leave. At approximately 12:51 a.m. on September 17th, cameras captured the final images of Jill and Bennett on that route. Then, they moved out of the camera's view. The next few minutes would become the most harrowing period of Jill's life, and the moment a murder investigation began. A scream in the night, after moving out of the camera's view, Jill and Bennett headed toward the area near the abandoned Farburn guard station on Stonywood Road. It was a desolate spot, dimly lit and, at that hour of the night, virtually deserted. Bennett hadn't just happened to be there. He had followed Jill. According to the case file, it was here that he attacked her. Jill was raped. Then, the violence escalated viciously. She was struck on the head and face with a hard object, sustaining multiple severe injuries. Some of the wounds resembled cuts from a sharp object, though the exact weapon was never conclusively identified. Bennett continued to beat Jill, kicking and stomping on her. Her head struck a pipe. He strangled her and dragged her body. Yet, what made the case particularly harrowing was not merely the level of violence, it was what happened next. Bennett left the scene. He had time to walk away, time to stop, call for emergency services, or seek help. But he did none of that. Instead, he returned to his home, gathered his belongings, took his work truck, and drove back to the site of the attack. This was a crucial turning point in the investigation, as it revealed that his actions did not simply end with the initial attack. Upon returning, Bennett resumed his assault on Jill. Investigators later discovered bloodstains on a nearby iron gate. The location and nature of these traces indicated a second phase of violence, an attack that occurred after Bennett had already left the scene. In other words, he had time to reflect, yet he still came back. Bennett then retrieved a green gasoline can and used the fuel to start a fire. Some flammable materials, including his own reflective protective clothing, were placed beneath and around Jill. The motive seemed clear: to destroy the evidence, to burn anything that could link him to the crime. But forensic experts later uncovered a horrifying truth. Jill was still alive when the fire was set. As the flames flared up, people nearby remained completely unaware of what was happening. A man walking his dog heard a scream, followed by a woman's voice repeatedly saying, "No." Another woman heard it too. She stepped out into her back garden and listened, but the sound seemed to be coming from the direction of a nearby hotel, so she went back inside. This is not a story about someone deliberately ignoring Jill's plight. They simply didn't know. No one knew exactly what was happening. A scream in the middle of the night could easily be mistaken for an argument, a drunk person, a noise from the hotel, or something unrelated to oneself. Yet, not far away, Jill was dying. Around 3:30 a.m., an off-duty police officer passing through the area spotted the fire. A call was made, and firefighters arrived at the scene. There, they discovered Jill's body near Stonywood Road. A woman who had left a concert just hours earlier, a mother of 2 young children, was now dead. The camera that doesn't lie. As the crime scene was cordoned off, an immediate question arose. Who was Jill Barclay, and why had she been murdered? Her partner, Leon Grant, had reported her missing. However, because the body had been severely damaged by fire, identification was far from straightforward. Ultimately, distinctive tattoos on the body helped confirm her identity. Jill was dead, but the investigation was only just beginning. Scottish police quickly traced individuals who had been in the area, and CCTV footage proved crucial. Investigators began piecing together the sequence of events. Jill left the pub. Bennett appeared. He walked ahead of her, then turned back, waited, and checked his surroundings. Jill maintained her distance. Then, both headed toward the spot where she was attacked. The camera could not reveal Bennett's thoughts to the police, but it showed his actions. And in criminal investigations, actions sometimes speak louder than words. The police tracked Bennett down. He hadn't simply vanished into the shadows. He was working in the area. There was a truck, an employer, a place to stay, and a family in Fife. After committing the crime, Bennett left Aberdeen in his truck, taking the A96 and heading south toward Fife. Upon his arrival, he washed his clothes. It was an action prosecutors would later argue amounted to an attempt to destroy evidence. But what Bennett didn't know was that investigators had a vast array of items to examine: clothing, the car, surveillance footage, the crime scene, and, crucially, blood. Jill's blood was found on Bennett's clothes, on his hands, and in the bathroom sink where he was staying. This indicated an attempt to clean up the traces, yet cleaning is not the same as erasing. Forensic experts can detect signs invisible to the naked eye. When all the evidence was pieced together, the picture became increasingly clear. Bennett had followed Jill. He was near her when she was last caught on camera. He was present in the area where the crime occurred. His car was used. His clothing turned up at the scene. Jill's blood was found on him. And then, he left Aberdeen. Police arrested Bennett, and he was charged on the very day Jill's body was discovered. It was a murder case in which the suspect was identified in a remarkably short time. Yet, one question remained that physical evidence could not answer. Why? Why Jill? Why did a man with whom she had no prior relationship decide to follow her? Why did he attack her? And what was going through his mind during those moments? That was the question both the investigators and Jill's family wanted answered, but the full answer would never be revealed. What was going on in Bennett's head? After his arrest, Bennett underwent a psychiatric evaluation. 2 independent experts assessed him at different times. Both reached the same diagnosis. Bennett had autism spectrum disorder. But this point needs to be made very clear. The experts did not conclude that autism prevented Bennett from understanding his actions, nor did they suggest he was unaware that his behavior was wrong. This is crucial, because autism is not a simple explanation for violent behavior. The vast majority of people with autism are not violent. In this case, the court did not view the diagnosis as the cause of Bennett committing the crime. Another detail is also noteworthy. Bennett's lawyer stated that he claimed not to remember what had happened. Yet, that claim stands alongside a very specific sequence of actions: stalking Jill, attacking her, leaving the scene, returning, resuming the attack, using petrol, setting the body on fire, leaving Aberdeen, washing his clothes. These actions formed a sequence that investigators could reconstruct through evidence. Ultimately, Bennett entered a plea under Section 76 of Scots law. He pleaded guilty to raping Jill Barclay, guilty to murder, and guilty to attempting to pervert the course of justice by destroying evidence. This meant there was no lengthy full trial before a jury, and no parade of witnesses recounting every detail. Jill's family was spared part of that painful process, but at the same time, they also lost the chance to hear the defendant himself fully explain what had happened, and the question why remained. On May 24, 2023, Bennett was sentenced at the High Court in Edinburgh. Judge Lord Arthurson described the crime as exceptionally grave and brutal. The court heard testimony regarding the impact of the case on the family, Leon, Jill's children, her mother, and her aunt. A family had lost a woman they loved, and 2 young children were left to grow up without their mother. The court determined that the sentence reflecting the severity of the offense would have been around 29 years before eligibility for parole consideration. However, Bennett's term was reduced to 24 years due to his early guilty plea and regulations concerning offenders under the age of 25. He was still sentenced to life imprisonment. The 24-year mark does not guarantee freedom after that time. It is simply the earliest point at which release could be considered, subject to applicable conditions. Additionally, he received a 4-year sentence for perverting the course of justice. Furthermore, his rape conviction resulted in his indefinite placement on the sex offenders register. A sentence, a number, yet no number could bring Jill back to her family. Jill was more than just a name in a case file. When a case hits the headlines, it is easy for the victim to become nothing more than a name in a file. A name, a date, a location, a verdict. But Jill Barclay was a person before she became a victim. She was 47 years old. She had been with Leon for about 2 decades. Together, they raised 2 children. She worked as a technical professional for Petrofac. She practiced kickboxing. Friends nicknamed her the kickboxing ninja. She loved music. She loved nights out. And those who worked with her remember her laughter. That is what her family and friends want people to remember, not just her final moments. Not the image of the crime scene, not the fire, not the injuries, but Jill, as she was before all of that. A woman with a family, a job, friends, hobbies, a life, and a Friday night that she thought would end just like hundreds of others. A concert, a pub, a walk home. But it didn't end that way. What makes this case so haunting isn't just the level of violence. It's the gap of about 25 seconds between Jill and Bennett captured on camera. 25 seconds. A tiny span of time. But in this case, it reveals that Jill sensed danger. She tried to avoid it. She slowed down. She let the distance between them grow. She didn't know what the man might do, and she couldn't have known that those precautionary measures ultimately wouldn't be enough. That is why this story should not be told as a lesson implying the victim should have done something differently. There is no evidence that Jill put herself in harm's way. She was simply walking home. The responsibility lies with the person who decided to follow her, the one who chose to attack her, chose to return, chose to set the scene on fire, and then tried to cover their tracks. Jill's death deeply affected the Dice community. Those who knew her organized memorials. An event titled "Rave It Like You're Jill" was held to honor a woman who loved music and dancing. The message was clear. Jill's final night must not become the sum total of her story, for her life was far more than those last few terrifying minutes. And there is another detail we must not forget. 2 people heard the scream. They were close by, yet they didn't realize what was happening. Not because they didn't care, but because in the dark, people often try to find an ordinary explanation for an unusual sound. It could have been the hotel, an argument, a drunk person, or anything at all, until the truth came to light. And by then, it was too late. Jill Barclay had just left a concert she loved. She stepped out into the night. Cameras captured her every step. A man walking ahead, then turning back. A woman slowing down. A 25-second gap. Then darkness. A scream, flames, and an investigation. But if there is one thing to remember about Jill, it is not how she died, but how she lived: a mother, a partner, an engineer, a kickboxer, a friend who brought energy into every room, a woman who, at 47, still loved to enjoy music. That was Jill Barclay. Not just a name in a court verdict. Not an anonymous victim. She was a person with a whole life behind that fateful night. And perhaps, that is what we should remember most. For a case may end when the judge hands down a sentence. A suspect may be sent to prison. A file may be closed. But for those who loved Jill, the story never truly ends. If this story has given you food for thought, please leave your comments below. And if you would like to keep following cases analyzed from an investigative perspective, please subscribe to the channel. Because in the next case, we will once again set out to uncover what cameras, forensic evidence, and court records have left behind.